a special event on August 23rd. That is the anniversary of the execution of Sacco and Vanzetti. If you don't know, this church has a long history with the Sacco and Vanzetti case that goes all the way back to our founding in 1920. Some of the founders, the founding mothers, befriended Sacco and Vanzetti and gave them English classes in prison and had a relationship with them all the way until they were executed in 1927. If you want to find out more about that case, talk to us. We have an entire floor that's dedicated to the legacy and memory of Sacco and Vanzetti. It's on the 3rd floor, and we'd be glad to give you a little tour of the archives there. That's August 27th. Then September comes, and we have another Palestine-related event, Omar Badar. Omar is a good friend of this church. He used to work in this building when we hosted the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, which was formed after 9/11 in response to the horrible things that were happening to Middle Eastern, especially Arab people and Muslims in the 2000s. Omar is now communications director of the organization Public Citizen in Washington, D.C., and he's a Palestinian American and an eloquent, fiery voice online for Palestine. That's September 8th. We also have in September 3 wonderful music events. We call it Summer Jazz at CCB. September 2nd is a young Jacob Rosen, called brilliant drummer who just graduated from Berkeley. His father is named Josh Rosen. He plays at many of our events. He's a magnificent pianist, and Jacob has lined up some of the best jazz players in town. Tim Ray on the piano, and John Lockwood on the bass to join him, as well as other guests. That's September 2nd. September 15th, we have Jose Soto, who is also recently out of Berkeley, but became a professor at Berkeley, and he's a Costa Rican composer, and he will be coming here fresh in the aftermath of his little gig at Lincoln Center, if you can imagine that. That's September 16th, which is also Central American Independence Day for all the countries that got their independence all at once. Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So come join us for that. And the final event is Friday, September 29th, and that is Anastasia Petrova, also known as Anna Petrova. She's a magnificent pianist, just of profound depth. She is from Kazakhstan, and also in that same category, recently graduated from Berkeley and already a professor at Berkeley. So look out for those events. They'll all be online, and they're all live streamed, and all proceeds to the performers. Let's see, what else do we have coming up? Of course, in October, we start our regular season of events. Every Sunday, and a lot of different weeknight events as well. We have Muslims for Progressive Values that meet here once a month and put on really interesting programs, both of a spiritual nature and also of an educational nature. Muslims for Progressive Values, and lots of other things. If you're interested in finding out more about Community Church, talk to me or to Amar Ahmad, who is our communications director and program guru. He's back at the controls, hoping to figure out how to run a new computer and do an even better broadcast than we bumblingly already do with everything we do here at Community Church. Anyway, I hope you're having a great summer, and I hope you partake of my offering to this this dinner, which is sun gold tomatoes. I'm obsessed with them, and I have 15 plants that are giving like crazy right now. So have some sun gold tomatoes. They're on there. They're like dessert, really. They're so sweet. I just want to sing a song before we bring up Mazin. This is written by my friend Jay Mankita, and it's about hopefully someday the end of flags and countries, and when we will pledge allegiance to the earth. As I have come to know this world from the moment of my birth until the day my life is done, I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. From this world we have grown, planet, body, Gaia home, learning to make peace with ourselves, realize we're not alone. As I have come to know this world from the moment of my birth until the day my life is done, I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. And we are all made of dust, and we'll all return someday. All of our weapons and our power, not so hard to wash away. As I have come to know this world from the moment of my birth until the day my life is done, I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. As we live, so live all. Flags and countries rise and fall. In the rhythm of this planet, I can hear my own heart call. Yes, I have come to know this world from the moment of my birth until the day my life is done, I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. I'll pledge allegiance to the earth. Thank you. Feel free to join on our mailing list, which is back there. We also have a petition going around, which is going to our decision makers to free the Holy Land Foundation 5. They received our December 2022 Sacco and Vanzetti Award, 5 Palestinian American businessmen who started an amazing charity that became the biggest Muslim charity in the United States. And then 9/11 happened, and they were demonized and turned into villains for doing good work for children in Palestine and the Middle East, and even good charity work in the United States. And 3 of them are serving hard prison terms, and it's enormous injustice. We had Miko Peled come here and speak on their behalf. He wrote a book about the Holy Land Foundation 5. We have copies of it, by the way, if you'd like to purchase one. We also have copies of his book that's called The General's Son, the first book that he wrote, Miko Peled. I'm thinking back of how amazing a series of Palestine-related speakers we have had at Community Church. It's a point of great pride for us, and I want to thank Steve Lowe for that, for directing us to some just really eloquent speakers. Steve Lowe and the Gralta Foundation, who have underwritten our reception here, and we thank them for that, as well as their hospitality for Mazin and Jesse and many other Middle East speakers who come through here, and we get to put them on in association with Steve and Barbara. So thank you so much. So there's the sign up for the mailing list, wonderful events all through the year. I want to talk about another one that I just came up. This is Mass Peace Action, and it's next Tuesday, and it's all about reparations. It's a really interesting looking event. Kevin Peterson is one of the speakers, African-American man who has done all this work around Faneuil Hall and changing the name of Faneuil Hall so it's not named after a slave owner and slave dealer. And another speaker, I don't remember her name, but she's on a tour, and that'll be next Tuesday. All kinds of things happen in this building. So thank you for being with us. You honor us with your presence, and all I have to say is that these are better conditions than the last time we hosted Mazin, which was a moment in mid-COVID that he was not able to travel, and an event that we had originally scheduled for 7 p.m. he insisted on doing from Bethlehem at 3 in the morning. So we thank you for that, Mazin, and we thank you for being with us here tonight. And you all know probably more than I do about Mazin, but it's just exemplary work that he and Jesse do in Bethlehem with the Natural History Museum, and on behalf of the Palestinian people to do science in the midst of this horrific occupation. So I want to bring him up, and let's welcome Mazin Qumsiyeh. Yeah. No. I'm going to do a little thing here. I'm going to switch this mic out because it's not a good speaker mic, and I'm going to put. So that we have you live streamed. I just switched the channel, so this is the mic he's using.
Okay, this is for the case of the online people. For those who are here, you're not going to hear amplification of voice, and I have enough of a projected voice. You can hear me, I suppose, in the back. You can also come closer if you want. So, are you able to put that projector screen, or? Okay. So, anyway, I'm very happy to be here. Of course, it's not, as you heard, I spoke maybe 4 times at the community church here. And it's always an honor to see good friends here who, Barbara and Steve and others who are here, Leila, who over the years we've developed close friendships and working together on various things. It's not working. Maybe reconnected to that.
Okay.
Okay, how about that? Can they hear us online? All right. Anyway, thank you very much for coming, and especially, I spoke here in person actually almost 4 years ago, just before the COVID hit us, and it was a packed room, and now people stay at home and watch these things, and that's also good. In some way, it's safer, but of course, it's good to also see people in person. So, anyway, what can I tell you today? First, that something new, that Jessie is here with me, of course, and that's that's very important. Because she was kind of stuck in Palestine because she didn't have family reunification. We applied for her in December 2007, and it was January 2022 when apparently the Israelis approved her, passed the approval to the Palestinian Authority, which held it for another year and 3 months, because they don't like that I criticize the Palestinian Authority, so they wanted to punish my wife for it. I don't know why. I mean, she's not the one who speaks against them. I'm the one who speaks against them. But anyways, so I'm glad to be traveling around, and this is the 4th talk I give that we give here in the U.S. We came on Monday night, and we'll be traveling around to 11 states. This is the 2nd state. We were in Connecticut before. And we'll be giving talks on various subjects, but mostly centered around sustainable human and natural communities in Palestine. And things have changed since I last spoke, for example, before the COVID here. So I do want to say some things about those changes that happened. Of course, every day there's new things in Palestine. Just this past week, for example, there's fires in the Galilee. There is a continuing intra-Zionist conflict between the right-wing Zionists and the ultra-right-wing Zionists. Such a big conflict. There is, of course, the continuing killing of Palestinians and raiding of refugee camps like in Jenin and Nablus. There are the demolitions of homes. There's the ethnic cleansing that's happening in the South Hebron Hills. There are many things that are going on that are negative. There's also a lot of things that are positive that are happening, and I'm hoping to talk a little bit about that. Can you show the first slide, please? And I'll skip through many slides if I just tell you to keep going, because I do want to leave enough time for questions and answers. So next slide. Just for, background for those of you who don't know, Palestine is very important geographically and geologically, being intersection of continents, where humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world. Even birds migrate through Palestine. Next slide. And this geographic and geologic history made it a very rich biodiversity area in Palestine. Next. And that's why also it became part of the Fertile Crescent, where humans first developed agriculture, domesticating wild plants and animals. Next. And this also meant that it became part of this cradle of civilization in the Western Asia region. The invention of the alphabet, of laws, of music, first musical instruments, first laws like Hammurabi's laws, etc. Next. And people lived off of sustainable agriculture for thousands of years. Next. And people were diverse, of course. There's multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious society. There was even multilingual society before 1948. More than 44 languages spoken in Palestine. This is a picture just showing diversity of people who were gathered together in 1932, some leaders, religious and secular leaders, and you can tell that there is diversity. Of course, diversity is strength, and this diversity was demolished by the project to make Palestine a Jewish state of Israel. Next slide. And this process of transforming Palestine meant the ethnic cleansing of the local people. More than 500 villages were depopulated. Next. Next. And there was shrinking of Palestine, as you know, and this picture of shrinking Palestine was drawn by my son in 1998 when he saw the shrinking map of the United States at the bottom where the Native Americans ended up in reservations. Next. This is what we call settler colonialism. That's a diagnosis that we have. And this diagnosis is not so bad, by the way. Every country had it. Its outcome is up to us, of course, what we do with this situation of settler colonialism. Most countries, by the way, ended up, as an outcome of settler colonialism, ended up with a country that had descendants of the colonized and descendants of the colonizers living in one country. Next slide. There are many symptoms, of course, associated with settler colonialism, including the violence, including walls, colonial settlements, permissions like what we talked about with Jessie and her family reunification, delays, etc. There is like even, it's hard to describe sometimes the level of depravity of colonial settlers in dealing with the natives of a country in terms of not only restrictions of movement, but outright, killing of natives in large scales, demolitions of homes, every aspect of our lives is controlled. Next slide. The aspect that I do want to just highlight quickly, because actually since I spoke here 4 years ago, we've been working a lot on, which is the environmental injustice issues in Palestine, climate justice, environmental justice, etc. As you know, humans face a lot of dangers, environmental dangers that are happening. That iconic picture in the upper right-hand corner of the 6 dead giraffes of drought in East Africa is just, reminds us of the role of humans in dealing with this beautiful planet and what we made of it. And these threats to our existence on this planet, threats to the existence of many other species and planets, even in the past 20 minutes, half an hour that we spoke, probably 2 or 3 species went extinct as we speak. So thousands of species are going extinct. There's actually more biomass now of humans and their domestic animals than all the other animals on Earth you know, all the vertebrates, the birds, the wildlife, the deer, the gazelles, everything else on Earth. It's remarkable how humans, in such a short period of time, since the Industrial Revolution, have transformed the face of this planet. Literally, even from space, you can see that transformation of the planet. Now, settler colonialism, of course, is another impact on the environment, and I don't need to belabor this aspect of it. Next slide. But I will mention a couple of things. One is when Israel destroyed over 500 Palestinian communities and bulldozed the trees around them, they uprooted both domestic trees and wild trees. Domestic trees like olives and figs and almonds, and wild trees like carobs and hawthorn and all of these things, oaks. And they planted one uniform culture, replacing a polyculture with a monoculture. Israel is famously around the world dubs itself as a green country, as having made, quote unquote, the desert green. This is such a blatant lie, by the way, and I'm going to use some harsh words in the next few words. But Israel is one of the worst environmentally around the world in terms of dealing with nature. Yet it dubs itself as this beautiful country that takes care of its nature. And the evidence for this is overwhelming. Even before I started delving into it in more detail in the past 3 or 4 years. I just finished a big monograph, by the way. It was with some 650, 700 references in it about the environmental damage that the Israeli colonization did in Palestine. And I'm not the only one who studied this. There were people like Iris Braverman, Israeli author, lawyer, who worked on environmental issues when she lived in Israel. Now she lives in Buffalo, New York. She kind of abandoned that Zionist dream, so to speak, because of what she saw, because how she saw the bizarre nature of this environmental fraud, if you want. For example, Israel, she talks in her last book, she had many books, her last book is called Settling Nature. And I reviewed the book for a magazine that asked me to review it. And she talks in this book about some of these issues in the Negev, for example, or in the South Hebron Hills, of the idea of setting up quote-unquote nature reserves, which are, of course, a fraud, because Israel, while having the largest percentage of its land designated as quote-unquote nature reserves, hardly any of these areas are really designated for the sake of animals and plants. They are designated for the sake of excluding Palestinians and making sure they don't enter. And that's what they do. Let's go to the next slide. I want to just, and next, I'm going to skip a couple of slides. This is the Jordan River. By the way, you can see it used to be flowing at 1,350 million cubic meters per year. Thanks to the Israeli damage of the Jordan River basin, now it flows at only 20 million cubic meters per year. You can compare the old picture with the new picture of what the so-called Jordan River is. It's no longer a river, by the way, it's a polluted stream, thanks to the colonial adventure. Let's go to the next slide. You can see how the Jordan River area here in the satellite image is drying up. So Israel did not make the desert bloom. It's the opposite. Israel has increased desertification in our region. Next. Next. This is Lake Hula, by the way. Lake Hula and the wetlands of the Hula. Go back one slide, maybe it's worth seeing. The picture on the lower right-hand corner shows Palestinian women around Lake Hula harvesting the reeds to use for building houses. There were about 15 Palestinian communities around this wetland area, which Israel removed all the native Palestinians, but also when they drained, as I called it, draining the swamps. Of course, I hate the word swamps. They are wetlands. Wetlands are important biologically and also for the people that live there. Anyway, when they drained these wetlands, basically, and the people were kicked out, 219 species disappeared in this area. Next. So to go back to this issue of nature reserves, which Iris Braverman and I published papers now on it, and she published books on it, and I may end up publishing some books on the role of the Jewish National Fund in this process of destruction of the environment, while using the terminology that they are planting trees and making the desert blue. Here's the interesting thing. If you look at the map on the left side, that shows you the so-called green areas in the state of Israel, which is Palestine. Of course, Israel sits on top of Palestine. Now, it's curious why the borders of these areas, who selected these areas, who made these areas. Well, it turned out that no biologists were consulted, no environmentalists, Israeli or non-Israeli, were consulted in this. They were designated by the Jewish National Fund because if you actually, and I wish I made the map like that to show where the Palestinian communities are left in the state of Israel and the West Bank, and you can see why they designated those areas. For example, most of the Negev is actually semi-arid or arid regions, is not particularly important biologically, but they were designated as nature reserves. They're designated as nature reserves because there are still a lot of Bedouins in the Negev, and they wanted to exclude the Bedouin camels and Bedouin goats and sheep from grazing in those areas in the guise of nature reserves. They want to starve the Bedouins. So that's why they selected those. The same thing in the Galilee, the same thing in the Jordan Valley. The interesting thing, when me and Iris Braverman and many other scientists looked at this, it's also obvious from the map of this location what they did with the areas they designate as nature reserves once they finished excluding the Palestinians from them. Unlike, for example, Yellowstone National Park, the first nature reserve that was set up in the world was Yellowstone. And if you look back in the history, you will find also one of the justification presented in Congress for designating Yellowstone is to exclude the Native Americans from it. So it's not new that colonial powers use this tactic. But what's interesting, in the case of Yellowstone, they kept it basically nature reserve. In the case of Israel, they don't keep it as nature reserve. Once they exclude the Palestinians, because it's limited space, they develop it for Jewish use only. Whether it's settlements or military training, for example, the areas in the Jordan Valley that are designated as quote-unquote green areas, on the right side, you can see the map of the green areas in green, and on top of them sits a military training zone in red. The picture in the middle is the South Hebron Hills, where you heard probably about Yatta and South Hebron Hills, that they are removing Palestinians, and the Israeli High Court just approved removing Palestinians from the South Hebron Hills. And there are two excuses. One, that it's a nature reserve, and two, that it's a military training zone. I mean, think about it for a minute. How could it be both a nature reserve and also a military training zone? And you can see it on the map, actually. The red area is the military training zone, sitting on top of most of the so-called nature reserve. Go to the next slide. What do they do in South Hebron Hills? If you go to the next slide. That's what they do in the South Hebron Hills. Military training zone, literally bombing the area with helicopters, running tanks in it. While at the same time, next slide, go to the next slide, they arrest young children for picking wild oregano, za'atar, in the area because, hey, they are trespassing on a nature reserve. They are picking oregano. Okay, is picking oregano more dangerous to the nature reserve than running tanks in the middle of the nature reserve? Of course, it's not logical, but that's the logic of colonialism, logic of Zionism. Next. And they demolish, of course, Palestinian schools and homes in that area. This is a school that they demolished in the South Hebron Hills. Next. Next. They use the same, by the way, for national parks, etc. My students and I and volunteers at the Institute, they publish papers on this. We're now publishing 2 papers a month, roughly in peer-reviewed journals. This is just a couple of papers, for example, on the genotoxic effect of Israeli industrial settlements. Just the past month, we actually submitted 5 papers related to environmental justice issues, and one on the issue of mental colonization of the occupiers. I had published before a research paper on mental colonization of the Palestinian people. And this new paper is about the mental colonization of the Israeli people, the privileged people. After all, they are also infected by that mental colonization that makes them oblivious to the facts, the ones that, like I mentioned to you about nature reserves. They are mentally colonized. We can talk about that in the discussion if you want. Next slide. Next. Next. I don't want to spend too much time talking about all these symptoms. This is Jabal Abu Ghnaim near my house, which I took land from my relatives there. And this is, as you can see, they made the desert bloom. The picture on the top is the 1997 picture, and the picture on the bottom is a more recent picture of how they changed the desert into a green area of beautiful housing. Next. And this is also making the desert bloom. Next. Next. Okay. Now I come to 2 other subjects I want to cover. What have we been doing about this? What are we Palestinians doing on the ground? And one time I talked here, I talked about my book called Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment. I'm not going to talk about this here. I just want to highlight the work of 2 institutions that I'm involved in on issues of helping, on there's all this negative energy around us, all these negative things that are being done. What are we doing positively, so to speak? So I'll start with next slide. Next, yeah. This is the Rotary Club of Bethlehem. I'm the president of the Rotary Club this year. And I want to just highlight some of the things that we did in the Rotary in the past few years. Next. So the Rotary Club was established around this period, 2013, late 2013, early 2014, so it's less than 10 years old. And we have engaged in helping orphans, for example, in Bethlehem, supporting an orphanage, the SOS orphanage. Next. We were engaged in a large project in Gaza which helps women in Gaza, especially pregnant women, women with children, for nutrition, for providing them with vitamins, for example, providing them with counseling about proper nutrition while pregnant and for children and things like that. I'll show you a couple of slides on this. Next. Next. We helped about 4,500 women. These are just some of the pictures of the activities in the area with these women and children. Next. Gaza, as you know, is 2.3 million Palestinians. More than 2/3 of them are refugees. More than 80% of them live below the poverty line, and most are in abject poverty. Poverty line, by the way, globally is defined as $1 per day or less. So you can imagine that. The Rotary does a lot of other functions in the Bethlehem area and nearby and in other areas. For example, we delivered equipment for neonatal care to baby hospitals in the Bethlehem area. Next slide. When the COVID-19 hit, we imported equipment like PCR machines and things like that for testing for the disease in the Bethlehem area, and there was a testing center that functioned in Bethlehem thanks to our support. We also delivered supplies, food supplies to needy families during COVID-19 because of the lockdown, and many people were living, basically from day to day on this. We delivered coolers to schools. Over 35 schools so far have water coolers. These are water systems that both filter the water, making it more drinkable, and also cool it so that the children can have cool water and clean water for drinking. And we hope to expand this project to more than 120 schools in the next phase. Next. These are just some more of the projects that we have done. Next. This is part of the Rotary function where we got me and 4 or 5 others received the Paul Harris Award, which is considered a prestigious award for donors to such projects. One of the people there, by the way, a second guy from the right, Iyad Burdena, died recently of cancer. Unfortunately, he has young children. And now his wife is a member of Rotary. So, next. And this is Christmas activities, delivering gifts to children, etc. Next. We also supported Rotary globally. And I'm proud to say that our Rotary, even though we're a new Rotary Bethlehem, as I mentioned, started about 10 years ago. The Rotary Club International, of course, has clubs in like 140, 150 countries. Rotary was started by some group of people, I think in Chicago, over 100 years ago. And it's the reason they called it Rotary is because it was just a very small group of people, and they rotated their meetings at different houses of the initial group members. And Rotary International set up priorities that worked for them for 100 years. They include like healthcare, women advocacy, child care, education, etc., sustainable living. Recently, they added the environmental work just last year. as a top priority of Rotarians around the world. I'm glad that we were ahead of the rest of the Rotarians in pushing in environmental work. So, for example, we set up a community garden in Palestine where children, even from the refugee camp, can come and plant some things and grow their vegetables, etc. Next. The second group I wanted to highlight, besides the Rotary, that I'm proud to belong to, and also in this case having founded it with Jesse and a few other volunteers, is the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. The Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, we started in 2014. Next slide. And what you see on the next slide, please. We now have a lot of sections within this institute. Even though it's a very small institute, we have Museum of Natural History, we have Botanical Garden, we have an ethnography exhibit, we have basically animal rehabilitation. We have many, many activities that we are doing on shoestring budgets, basically. We have no government support, no institutional support. We're part of Bethlehem University, but Bethlehem University only provided us the space and a guard, by the way. But we do most of the work based on volunteer effort and based on donations, and some of you were donors to our institute, so we appreciate that. The next few pictures will show you some of the facilities, and we welcome you to come and visit these facilities like the Botanic Garden, like the museum, exhibits. We're now going to grow into a bigger museum, as I'll show you. This is the ethnography exhibit. Next. Basically we work with a lot of children. Yeah, keep going. This is the community garden and aquaponic systems that we produce food sovereignty basically for us. This is working with women groups, marginalized communities to increase basically their empowerment to produce their own products and sell them. We help them in marketing. Next. We do workshops for them on like how to create products from organic materials, even like cosmetic products and soap and things like that. Next. We work a lot with children. In the next few slides, you will see some of the children activities. Next. Keep going, yeah. Just keep going on these children activities that we do. Every week we have children activity. We also have mobile museum that we travel with around the country, bringing this education. Stop here on this slide. This is from Friday's activity. Last Friday we had an activity on hyenas because we have 5 baby hyenas that were rescued, brought to us for rehabilitation, and we were taking care of these hyenas. So we decided to make the Friday function for children about hyenas and dispel some of the myths about hyenas that their parents may have. This was a great activity, I think, and you can see a German volunteer actually holding the hyena. We have international volunteers from 45 countries that help us with these activities. We wouldn't be able to do this work without volunteerism and individual donations. Next. So you can see with children, they enjoy themselves touching and feeling and experiencing what these things with hands-on. We don't lecture to children. We just create an environment for them to learn and expand their knowledge. Next. 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 These are all functions for children. Next. And next. Our team, we now have molecular labs, we have a herbarium, we have, we give lectures, you can see there the herbarium in the upper left side, they're preparing the plants. We published many papers on plants in the West Bank, and we're now publishing on molecular, like using environmental DNA and things like that. Next. Next. These are just some of our partners. We have many partners now that give us some support for specific projects. Like we had a project from National Geographic Society. We had a project just concluded with the European Union for promoting diversity, both biodiversity or biological diversity, but also human diversity. And I was pleasantly surprised that the EU decided to fund us, even though promoting human diversity would be essentially anti-Zionist, because, because as I said, Zionism wants a monoculture, a mono plants, mono humans, and we are trying to restore diversity of both nature and human diversity. We worked on climate change a lot. We've been accelerating our work on climate change through lobbying at the, I'm not sure I like the word lobbying, but trying to influence, meetings, sometimes, most of the time failing, by the way, to try to influence global climate change direction. As Greta Thunberg said, you know, these leaders go meet like at Sharm el-Sheikh recently, and this year they will meet in the United Arab Emirates, chaired by whom, by the way? The chair of the committee to organize this huge climate change conference is no other than the sheikh in charge of the oil in the United Arab Emirates. So as Greta Thunberg said, this is blah, 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 you know, not really changing about climate change. But we continue to try to struggle, and with politicians and governments, including the Palestinian Authority, by the way, I can say we are about 20% successful. Not very successful. In the Palestinian Authority, we did succeed in finally getting them, after about 15 years of lobbying, to rethink the fact that they received the list of nature reserves from the Israelis, and they accepted this. This, to me, it boggles my mind. Why would you accept a list of nature reserve provided to you by your enemy as actual nature reserve? Why don't you do your own study and decide whether these are real nature reserves or they are not real nature reserves? So anyway, we succeeded finally in this, and we set up the map on the left, not published yet, the new nature reserves that we set up in the West Bank, totally different than the one that they were peddling on us. Next. And this was with the help of the International Union of Conservation of Nature, and based on scientific criteria, and we published a paper on it. We just got the paper to the journal, and it was accepted. We worked on the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan for the State of Palestine. Very, very important work, because it will guide our work going forward on nature protection, environmental protection in the West Bank, based on scientific principles, not based on the BS of the Jewish National Fund. Next. So we have been very successful, and I would say hugely successful, considering the challenges and the obstacles ahead of us, And the obstacles are not just Israeli obstacles, of course, Palestinian Authority obstacles, American government obstacle, European Union obstacles, Arab world obstacles. All the countries in the Arab world are against us. Basically, the Palestinians, we're kind of orphans of the world, We don't have anybody supporting us other than people like you, individuals. But generally, governments, corporations are all against us. So we have been successful. Part of our success is innovation, involvement of volunteers, involvement of action from people like you supporting us financially or otherwise, and we have made a difference on the ground. And this, I don't want to brag too much, but in one case, for example, we worked with 80 farmers, showing them basically eco-friendly agriculture, which a lot of it is lessons from what their ancestors did, their parents, grandparents did in agriculture. And as a result of this, they reduced their cost because they stopped using pesticides, insecticides that cause cancer, while also increasing their production because they started using like compost and other organic ways of production. They increased their production over the 3 years of the project by 35%. So it is possible, and this is related to food sovereignty. So I think we have been very successful and hugely successful when you consider the milieu, the structure, the context in which we were operating. And a lot of our success has to do with people and the involvement of people and the networking with people. People like you and many others around the world who come visit us, support us, volunteer with us. You will see in the next couple of slides some of the volunteers and what they have done, some of the staff members that we have and who they are. Most of them are, by the way, young. Jesse and I are the old folks in the institute. So you can see, the volunteers here, for example, who built a biogas unit in the upper right-hand corner, or that are helping in the garden, or that are cooking for each other. And we provide room and board, by the way, for the volunteers, and you're welcome to come and volunteer with us. Next. And we don't think there is a box to think outside the box. This is all imaginary. I wrote a paper in a book about post-colonialism 2 years ago. That's titled Liberation from Mental Colonization. And because a lot of the problems that we face, the challenges, are not the physical challenges, they are the mental challenges. And if we free our mind, we can do a lot more. We dream big. This is the structure of the new museum, which will be in about a year and a half or two, will be finished. It's also on this picture here. This will cost about $1.5 million. We've already raised 1.1 million. So we need another 400,000. So if you have a rich uncle or aunt, please let us know. But also a donation of $20, because that's how most of the others were raised, based on for our operation, everything was small donations. So we welcome small or large donations. Thanks. Next slide. This is the back of the new building, what will be like with elevators access, handicap access. Well, next. And this is the structure 3D of the facilities that as they will appear. Next. Next. So this is our website, PalestineNature.org, and you can email us at info@PalestineNature.org. We're happy to work with you. We're going, as I said, this is the second state in an 11-state tour. So we would love, for example, for you to connect us if you know people in the other states we're heading to, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North, Delaware, DC, Maryland, Arizona, etc. We have a schedule that's on the web that I sent by email. Now, many of you are already on our email list. Those of you who are not on our email list, please give us your email. Jesse will add you to our email list. I will stop here and happy to discuss subjects that you find intriguing or interesting or worthy of discussion. But I do want to say, I'm 66 years old, and I've been active, doing activism since I was in my early 20s. I should have been a bit earlier, but anyways, I waited till I'm 22 to get active. So it's been over 40-some years, 44, 45 years. And I consider what I do is the most pleasant. I don't take vacations, but to me, when I sit tonight with Steve and Barbara, I'm sure for me that's pleasure. That's wonderful, because we network, we think about what we do. We're thinking of basically being involved in something bigger than ourselves. To me, that is the beauty of life. We're all going to end up, as Dean sang about, what we are doing. We're all going to end up in dust anyway, so we might as well try to do something positive for planet Earth and leave it a better place than what we inherited, which is not that pretty, by the way. The more I read about history, the more I realize how the folly of the human condition. Actually, when I was staying with Jessie at Alice Robinson's house, she has a book from Mark Twain, which I've never read before, so I read half of it in the 3 nights I was there. And Mark Twain was a very astute observer of the human condition in the 19th century, and the folly of it. For example, what Spain and the US were fighting over the Philippines, and how the US tricked the Philippine movement to think that they will get liberation from Spain. And, and then, of course, as soon as they won against Spain, with the peasants, they went and obliterated the peasants. The same thing happened with us in the Arab world, by the way, when the British told us, go get rid of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is a bad empire, blah, blah, blah. And then they brought us American and British and French empires, which were worse than the Ottoman Empire. So this is the folly of the human condition. We can lament it, we can be sad about it, but we can also do something about it. We can do positive actions, and what we are trying to do is, do something positive and, at least help some children, women, other, succeed, feel empowered. Our motto at the Institute, by the way, is respect. First, self-respect, because that's empowerment. I have to respect myself before I do anything else. I have to believe in myself. I have to free my mind from mental colonization. That's empowerment. The second level of respect is respect for other human beings, regardless of their background or religion or politics. And the third is respect for the animals and plants that share this beautiful planet with us. These 3 levels of respect that are interconnected are critical if we are going to have a livable planet. By the way, if you ask me on a scientific basis, just to give you a probability of whether we as a species will make it or not, I would say it's about 50-50. I'm not sure. Maybe even 40-60, and not in a positive way. Okay. But we have to do something, and what this community church has been doing for decades, of course, is something positive. You know, Martin Luther King spoke here, you know, other people spoke here that are much more astute than I am, but, you know, we each have to do what we can within our own circumstance and our own limitations, and I encourage you to get involved, as most of you are, of course. Those of you who are young and new, as I told Molly, you're welcome to come to Palestine, and we would welcome volunteers, old and young. We had volunteers as young as 9 years old and as young as 90 years old. So, so you're welcome. You have to be young at heart, of course. That's critical. All right. Thank you very much for hosting us.
A little bit noisy, but thank you. It's just a bad cable here. You are such an inspiration. We have every sort of speaker, from complete, absolute doomsayers to visionaries like you that are just so positive and so amazing. Mazin just brought some things up here, which reminds me that we have a whole table back there filled with Palestinian handicrafts and products. They all come from Olive Branch Fair Trade, Linda Cohen's shop on Martha's Vineyard, and we're very proud to be able to feature them. Have a look before you go, and we can make a transaction either by cash or by credit card. So let's have a conversation, and let's see if anybody else wants to.
Before we let's put it back. We move it. Okay. So I want to give the Community Church of Boston these two items. This is part of a poem by Tawfiq Ziyad about Palestine. Tawfiq Ziyad was the mayor of Nazareth for a while, and he had a poem called Here We Will Stay, and only thing I just noticed is the hook for it is on the wrong side, so you may have to fix it. And the second thing is this kufiyeh. This is the Palestinian headdress. It has symbolic features of it, including this pattern, which is like the chicken wire things, which before used to be white, you know, completely white. And the idea is we may go back to being completely white once we have freedom, once we don't have this symbolic fencing that's keeping us from our land. So thank you very much for hosting us, and it's an honor to be with you.
Can we read this poem?
Sure. I'll read the Arabic first for the sake of Layla, and then I'll read the translation. هنا باقون كأننا 20 مستحيل في اللد والرملة والجليل. هنا على صدوركم باقون كالجدار، وفي حلوقكم كقطعة الزجاج كالصبار، وفي عيونكم زوبعة من نار. Roughly translated, here we will stay in Lidda and Ramla, and in the Galilee we shall remain like a wall on your chest, and in your throat like a shard of glass, a cactus thorn, and in your eyes a sandstorm. So,
Right. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
And there's a story.
I just want to see if there's anyone else who would like to. The question? You can repeat the question. Yes, you're right. You're right. We don't have to deal with all that horrible noise.
So this, by the way, this plaque was, the poem was loved by a guy named Abdul Kavi, which we called affectionately Kavi. He was a person who was born in India, became a refugee in 1948 when India was split into Pakistan and India, and the Muslims were kicked to the north and the Hindus were kicked to the south, by the way. Ironically, the same year as our nakba. So he spent his first 12 years in India, the second 12 years in East Pakistan, which became known as Bangladesh. And then the third 12 years of his life he spent in the United Arab Emirates. When he was 36 years old, he went to London. He spent some time there. He made some money, and he decided to donate this money to Palestine and to start coming to Palestine. And he wanted to die in Palestine when he was diagnosed with cancer. He was not educated in the sense of official education, but very highly cultured. He loved poetry in both Persian and Urdu and in Arabic and in English. He knew Shakespeare like by heart and stuff like that. And this is one of the poems that he loved, and he wanted to distribute it around the West Bank. So he gave some money to do that, and he made these plaques, and this is one of the plaques that he made. And we distributed around the West Bank in honor of him, and he died indeed in Palestine. We buried him in Palestine because he said that's where I feel most at home. So anyway, that's the story behind this particular piece of artifact. All right, any questions, please, or comments?
Are hyenas native to Palestine?
Are hyenas native? Yes, of course. We have the striped hyena, which is different than the spotted hyena. My background, I wrote a book on the mammals of the Holy Land, by the way. So that's another hat I wear besides this hat. So the spotted hyena is a social animal, whereas the striped hyena is more solitary animal. They rarely stay together. Only during mating season, the male and female get together, and then the female takes care of the babies. So if you kill the female, of course, you destroy the brood, because hyenas in Palestine never hunt. They never kill a living animal. They are omnivorous. They eat both plants and dead animals, not living animals. So they live off of like animals that died, carcasses of animals. That's why they are not dangerous animals. We've had adult ones that we rehabilitated and released. And yeah, it's called Hyena syriaca, which is the Syrian brand of hyena. Okay. Yes. Stand up and raise your voice. Introduce yourself. Wow, two deep questions, Shifra. It may take me a while to respond to them. I'll see if I can, be brief about them. Shifra is asking for the sake of the online people. She's asking about hope. Where is the source of hope? And the second one is, what should people do to get to that stage where we are in a better state than what we are in now? All right. First of all, on the issue of hope, you know, from the dawn of human civilization, if you study history, you find a lot of evil being done, a lot of wars, a lot of conflict, a lot of torture. It's actually much worse 1,000 years ago than it is now. Globally, we have become a little better civilized. I don't say civilized yet. It's still a work in progress for humanity. But there's always been negative things going on. But there's always been remarkably good things happening, good people doing good things, helping each other, supporting each other. And, you know, one could be philosophical about it and say, like the Buddhists say, you know, the yin and the yang, you know, that this is natural to have, you know, there's not going to be heaven on earth. There is always heaven and hell on earth, and they're always together, and that will always be the case. The question is, where are you going to stand? Are you going to stand on the side of those committing evil and harming other people, or are you going to stand on the side of people who help each people? So you draw hope from the fact that there is a lot of positive energy in the face of negative energy around the world. And it's remarkable when you look at it. When you look at, for example, slavery, you know, slavery was such a horrible thing. But there was people who helped, even white people who helped, you know, with the smuggling slaves, you know, to the north, etc. So there is always people who are doing positive things, and we want to be part of those people. I am not particularly keen on determining my activism based on the outcome of a particular situation. My activism is not based on calculations of outcome. Why do I say that? Because, you know, ultimately, the way you live your life is more important than the destination. Who was it who said peace is not a destination, peace is the road? The road that you take is peace. So if you take the road that we took, that you took, many of you took this road, it's not an easy road, by the way. You could become richer if you take the other road, and you could have more comfortable life and whatever. But it is a road that is at least allows you to look yourself in the mirror and do the things that you believe in, and say, hey, I'm gonna get up in the morning. You know, today we got up early, of course, to get to the events. And Jesse and I have been sleeping very little because we have so much work to do. But it is a road that is satisfactory, that makes us feel comfortable with ourselves, live better with our own skin. That's what's important, not necessarily a destination. And I cannot guarantee the destination. I cannot guarantee that Palestine will be free, by the way. Palestine could end up like Native Americans, you know, where they are left in few reservations. So it is not the destination, it is the road that you take. Now, what is this road, which is the second question that you raise? What should we do? What should each of us do? This I cannot tell you. I can tell you what I do, and I showed you some of what I do, because that's what my background and my knowledge and my experience. I mean, you start the Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability because I got a PhD in biology. And I was talking about environmental challenges since I was in my early 20s. So that's my own background. If your background is, I don't know, music, like Dean enjoys playing the guitar, you do activism via music, which he just did, okay, by singing a song. Somebody else may have interest in lobbying and interest in politicians, and they go after politicians, and all the power to them. So everybody does activism in their own way. If you want suggestions for activism, I can send you dozens of them not one or two. In fact, on my website, qumsiyeh.org, I have a list of 75 things that can be done. But I don't want to do all 75. You know, it's too much. I don't do all 75. I do 3 or 4 of them. So this is just a list of suggestions, but everybody does what they feel is, you know, for example, you can, if you're Jewish, you might want to reach the Jewish community and see, because they are supporting Israel, and you want to make sure that they're not, like, you know, supporting violence and supporting oppression. If you are, you know, a religious Christian, you may want to reach to the Christian Zionists and tell them, wait a minute, how is supporting genocide and ethnic cleansing consistent with Christian values, you know? It's illogical, you know. And Jesus said, you know, yeah, somebody hits you on the left cheek, you turn the right cheek to them. How is this consistent of bombing refugee camps, you know? Doesn't make sense. So you reach out in the context that you feel comfortable with. Okay, go ahead. Others? Yeah, Layla. Yeah.
We had a refugee who lived in our house who told us stories, and I just wrote that as part of my memoir about this girl. Adabar is a hyena, and she would tell scary stories. Adabar was like this huge animal that you really had to watch out for. But anyway, I think the environmental impact of my childhood and my kind of education showed me ways that I had to fight when I taught in the schools how to introduce even simple things as recycling when I was teaching for 23 years. And in 2009 I started writing a curriculum. Part of it, a fourth of it is called Earth. And now Boston uses it to focus on K2. But the other teachers fought me on it, because I think people are colonized in their minds in the US, not just about Palestine, which is a big issue and we want people to know about, but about the environment and how to teach children what to do to live in harmony. Part of what I wrote was about my Siti Mariam, my grandma from Bethlehem, Mariam,
Mm-hmm.
who would take me on walks and we would pick herbs and we would bring in things and make it salad. And these things I think people are totally separate from in the US. That's why I think it's very hard for people to see what the struggle is about, both for natives and for Palestinians. And I think we have to work on environmental education, anti-colonization, and environment.
Yeah.
all rolled in one. Otherwise, we're
Mhm.
fighting
Right.
ignorance galore. But
So, yeah.
I always love hearing you talk.
Thank you, Layla. Layla is a retired educator, and her comment is related to education about environmental issues and how this is an important aspect of what we need to do. And the other thing that she mentioned, which is a very good point to comment on, is the connectivity between these issues with each other. You know, I don't think you can be a good peace advocate if you don't also talk about the environment. I don't think you can talk about the environment without talking about peace. As you saw, the environmental injustice issues are tied to this because there's greed, corporate greed, for example. There's a connectivity between these issues. So when I talked earlier about empowerment of children and the work we do with children, that's precisely what Layla was speaking about, is how do we ensure that our children get that rounded education that, in my view, leads them away from what these societies now want them to become, They want, well, look what the education, even at the universities, by the way, what does it do? It takes people who might be thinking people, might be innovative people, and they shape them into good consumers. Good consumers of information, bullshit that they get from the media, good consumers of products, that they should have the best smartphone and the best car and the best house and the best this and the best that. Good consumers, not good citizens, not good involved activists, not good producers, but good consumers. This is the whole folly of the educational system that we call liberal education, which sometimes I don't see anything liberal about it. I think it's the most conservative and most right-wing education that you can give people when you shape their minds to be these obedient consumers. Which reminds me now, when you remember after September 11, the first speech by the President of the United States, do you remember what he said about what we should do as citizens of this country? Go out shopping. He said, keep the economy going, go out shopping. And I'm like, wait, there's something that doesn't compute. What about go out, read a book, understand what's going on in the world, understand why some people hate us, try to communicate, try to comprehend what we are doing, try to challenge your government, try to do something. No, go shopping? No, this is to me like crazy. What is this? So I think that's a part that I think Layla is alluding to, and our responsibility as educators is very, very high. I say always, in any country, people should invest, should have the best paid jobs should be of teachers. The best paid, most respected jobs should be of teachers. Those are the ones who are shaping the new generation. Please invest in them. Do not invest in, military-industrial complex and think that you are doing something positive for your society. Yes.
There's a couple questions in the Zoom chat. So someone is asking, where can we find your two papers on colonizing minds, colonization of Israeli minds, and
Mm-hmm.
So that's one question. And then another question is, Skip is asking, how is the climate crisis affecting Palestinian agriculture? How is the agriculture adapting?
Yeah, thanks for those two questions from online. The paper on mental colonization you can find on our website, which we put earlier, palestinenature.org, palestinenature, one word.org, and go under research. There's explore and then there's research, and there you will find our publications. You can download PDF files of all our publications, not all of our, but some of our key publications, including that one. As far as the climate change and what its impact globally, of course, is disruption of food supplies, and that's precisely why food prices are the highest they've ever been, and when they measure inflation, by the way, they always, some luxury items are lower in prices and they weigh them more than food prices. But food prices have been going up dramatically, and I challenge you, just go back over your own bills of a few years ago, buying yogurt or milk or eggs in the US or anything else, and you'll find that food prices are going up dramatically. And of course, in third world countries, this is even more pressing. In these developing countries, and with the crisis in Ukraine affecting wheat prices, price of bread in Egypt, for example, is now 5-fold more than it was 5 years ago. and that directly impacts the poor people. So the same for Palestine, climate change and the human politics around it, which is another point I should have made. When I listed those threats to us, including climate change, pollution, overexploitation, etc., I should have said these are not independent threats, settler colonialism. They're related to each other. They're tied to each other. They feed on each other. Climate injustice, climate change is tied to, of course, overexploitation of resources, use of fossil fuels, pollution, use of plastics. All of these things are connected to each other. So it's not just climate change. It is the connectivity between these threats that make our planet less and less livable for most people and for the animals and plants that we face. In Palestine specifically, of course, I wrote a lot about this, and I'm happy, by the way, to share even unpublished material with anybody. So the person who asked a question about climate change, if you email me at info@palestinenature.org, I can send you an unpublished chapter on the impact of climate change on Palestine. We haven't published it yet, but it's precisely related to your question. So the impact is dramatic, of course. Rainfall in Palestine has already declined. Temperatures have already risen more than 1.5 degrees in the past 30 years. We're expecting temperatures to rise another 2 to 4 degrees in the next 25, 30 years. We're expecting rainfall to fall another 20 to 30% in the same period. And you can imagine the problem with that we face, especially the native people, the Palestinians, because already Israel takes most of our water. And when water levels decline, rainfall decline, you can imagine they are going to keep their 95% of the water. And where it's going to come from additional water is from the 5% that's left for us. So it will be even more dramatic impact. This is globally the same. The West produces most of the greenhouse emissions, by the way, and now China caught up with the West because it's become industrialized. So they produce a lot of greenhouse emissions. But the impact of greenhouse emissions, gases, is more affecting countries like ours or sub-Saharan Africa than they are impacting, for example, New England. New England actually may get better in food production because they'll have less freezing temperatures and they can start growing new things if they want to that are not going to be killed by deep freezing temperatures in the winter. So some countries actually may benefit from climate change. It turns out, I don't know, if there is a God, why would he do this? But it's strange to me that the people who produce most of the greenhouse emission actually don't suffer as much as the people who had nothing to do with the greenhouse. I mean, the whole state of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, together, and we measured this, by the way, produces less greenhouse gases than the Israeli military alone, okay? I repeat, the whole West Bank and Gaza uses less fuel and produces less greenhouse gases than the Israeli military by itself, okay? So, but we pay the price for it. So again, you know, it's an unjust world. Our job is to try and readjust it, try and challenge the injustice, and try to fix it. Other questions or comments? Yes. Let's take some others. Go ahead. Yeah.
I heard you speak last night, and you were talking about the gas fields off the coast of Gaza. And I would, because I think here, people who are concerned about climate change
Yeah.
about gas fields.
Yeah, I skipped over the slide that relates to Gaza and these gas fields. Gaza is besieged, what I said last night. Oh, the question, just to repeat for the audience, she asked about the gas fields off of Gaza, which I mentioned in my talk yesterday in Hartford, and I didn't talk about today. Gaza is 2.3 million people. Most of them live in poverty at less than $1 a day, and many with no income whatsoever, and they are really literally starving. Why? Because they are blockaded. Now, why are they blockaded? They are blockaded not because of Hamas or terrorism or anything else. They are blockaded because Israel likes the gas fields off of Gaza, marine gas fields that have trillions of cubic feet of stored gas. And Israel is exploiting it, and Israel is now starting to export it to Europe to replace the Russian gas that used to flow into Europe at very cheap rates. Germany was very happy receiving Russian gas until somebody blew up that pipeline. Who is that somebody, by the way? This is an interesting question. My guess is it's either the CIA or the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, or the American intelligence services. And now, of course, somebody else has to profit. So it has to be gas fields, gas that's going to be supplied either from the pro-American companies, from the American companies operating in the Gulf, like United Arab Emirates or Qatar or one of those areas. But it's even closer if it's from Israel. So that's why we have a blockade of Gaza. Otherwise, you would think that why would they prevent fishermen from going into the sea more than 6 miles? Why 6 miles? Why not 7 or 8 miles? How is 6 miles secure for Israel and 7 or 8 miles not secure for Israel? Well, the answer is very obvious, because at 7 miles precisely, when you look at the map, that's where the gas fields start in the Mediterranean. So that's why fishermen are not allowed to fish there, because they don't want them to photograph what Israel is doing or to do anything that might impact those gas supplies. This kind of also brings up an issue of hypocrisy in the West, by the way, which I always, the depth of depravity of the Western world, governments I'm talking about, not people, by the way, sometimes shocks me. Look at Ukraine, for example. Russia, had a deal with the US when they allowed the reunification of Germany that NATO would not expand into the eastern areas that are liberated from Soviet occupation. And NATO reneged on this, signed the agreement, and they started expanding. NATO is now in like 10 other countries that they weren't there before. And now they wanted to expand further into Ukraine. And Russia said, enough is enough. We don't want you in Ukraine as NATO. Because Ukraine is very important to Russia, and because there's also a lot of Ukrainians who are opposed to that. The US government toppled the government in Ukraine that was supportive of Russia. So they toppled it and put this idiots that are supportive with the West and supportive of joining NATO. Okay, but nevertheless, regardless of how one feels, I'm not supportive of Russia or Putin for that matter. Let's say that they were wrong. Russia invaded Ukraine, occupied, let's use the language of the West, occupied parts of Ukraine. And now what does the West do? They're giving billions and billions of our tax money in weapons, of course, to Ukraine to defend itself against the Russian invasion and occupation, right? Okay, fine, let's buy this argument. Why is it that we are giving billions and billions of dollars to the state of Israel that's occupying Palestine for decades, not for 1 year, for decades? This is hypocrisy, the hypocrisy of the West, all right? Not only are we not supporting the Palestinians in their liberation struggle against the occupiers, but we are supporting the occupiers too. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. Again, the logic that we should use logic. We should not just fall into this propaganda that they give for us. And you have to follow the money also. Who's profiting? Well, it's very easy. Just look at the prices of stocks of companies that make weapons after the Ukraine war. You know, they're making tons and tons of money. Their stock prices are going up. So, other questions? Yes? Yeah, so Evelyn's question is about the goals of the Institute and how they evolved over the years. We started the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability in 2014. And obviously from its name, you can see where we are heading. We are interested in conserving biodiversity, but we're also interested in sustainability, human sustainability. That's also human diversity. So supporting biological and human diversity is the key vision, if you want, the long term, what we want to do. As far as the goals and the more proximate activities, they did evolve based on the needs of society, needs of nature. So I'd never anticipated, for example, when we started that institute, to have an animal rehabilitation unit. But there's no place else when they rescue an animal. Where are they going to send it? There's nothing, nowhere else. So they came to us and we said, let's do it. So sometimes you evolve in directions you didn't anticipate based on society's needs. You know, and if somebody else is doing it and doing it well, I don't want to do it. Let them do it. I support them. So we do things that are highly needed by society in which there is no other entity that's supplying that service, if you want. For example, when we started this mobile educational unit, mobile museum, nobody else has thought of it. And the reason we thought of it is because when we were doing field work in places like the South Hebron Hills, we tell them we have a museum, why don't you bring children to the museum? And they said, what, are you crazy? How are we going to get to your museum? We cannot even survive in our caves, you know, and Israel is trying to remove us. So you come to us, bring us your knowledge, whatever. So this started the idea of a mobile museum that takes our knowledge and our educational system to remote areas. When the woman empowerment and making things from natural products. I also, in 2014, I never thought of doing something like that. But it was society's need. When women came to us and said, you know, you talk about environmental conservation, but, you know, I need to make a living. How am I going to make a living? You know? So help me make a business. Help me do something. Help me at least make a product that I can sell. And so we did. We showed them that there are ways to make products and sell them. This is needs-based advancement and change in our goals. Of course, they fit under the same umbrella, as I said, of sustainable human and natural communities. So we're not going to deviate from that vision. But the specifics, yes, we evolve. And next year we may be doing something that I never thought of either. If you have ideas, please also give us. Yes.
In our country, the United States, we have a obesity epidemic, an autism epidemic amongst our children. And I'm old enough to remember when there were basically no obese children in
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, and that's because our agriculture system hasn't been completely captivated. And so the poorest people are eating food that is garbage, that's turned
Yes.
so they're eating, but it's worse almost than not eating, or I don't know how to say it. They're eating
Right,
poison.
right.
So, and that's happened in Mexico as well. I also worked as a part of a Quaker work camp when I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
And that, at that time, no Mexican was
Yeah.
obese. And now it's an epidemic in Mexico. Has this happened in Palestine, or have you escaped? Or do you still have your older ways of agriculture? And also, I have read that you have escaped the COVID-19 vaccinations, and that you are actually much less experiencing excess death than the Israelis, who vaccinated all of us, and that have a tragic problem.
Yeah. May I start with the second part regarding COVID and the vaccination? Initially, Israel actually even tried to sell or sold actually Palestinian authorities some expired vaccines to give to the Palestinian population. This is the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, by the way, which makes money off of these things. And there was a worry about Palestinians not getting vaccines. And we raised fuss about it, and this is, I'm thankful that our activism actually did make a difference, and the UN and the World Health Organization said, no, you Palestinians should get the vaccine, and Israeli health officials, I don't say many positive things about Israeli health officials, but in this case, Israeli health officials said it makes more sense to allow vaccines for the Palestinians through and not accept the government bureaucracy and policies with regards to Palestinians, which is that we don't care, let them die. Israeli health officials said doesn't make sense because Palestinians and Israelis are mixed like this. So if you don't prevent vaccines for the Palestinians, it will impact our health, Israeli health. So anyway, that's an issue that was short term and got fixed, and the Palestinians got the vaccines. Jesse and I got the vaccines, including the 3 shots, all free, etc. It was very good, really good system of vaccines. But thanks to the pressure, as I said. Now, with regards to nutrition and health of people, yes, it's a global pandemic, if we want to use that terminology, of poor eating habits that leads to obesity, to diabetes, and other kinds of problems. And it's, I hate to use this terminology, but it is the Western consumerist habits that spread rapidly around the world with Americanizations and hamburgers and cheeseburgers and fries and chicken wings and all that stuff. That's not a healthy diet, okay? I mean, yes, it's poison, and sweets, cakes, and stuff like that, and donuts and all that stuff. This is not natural diets of humans. Humans are primates, and if you look at the diets of upper primates, higher primates, most of it is vegetables, fruits, things like that, and very, very little meat. Occasionally, chimpanzees will kill some animal and eat it, or eat snails, but most of their food is vegetarian. So humans are not supposed to eat like this, and it's not healthy for us. And it had spread around the world with this ideas of you'd be more Western, you'd be more modern. I mean, Jesse and I just went to the United Arab Emirates, and McDonald's and Burger Kings are everywhere, and it's like, but the United Arab Emirates people were not used to this kind of diet. So now they are like, barrels, basically. And Palestine, you ask about Palestine, yes. There is also this westernization, the problem that we talked about of being good consumers of knowledge, consumers of products, consumers of hamburgers, is also coming to Palestine. Our job is to provide the opposite, to provide them with education, to explain to students that come to our institute, or that we take this mobile educational unit to them, to explain to them the danger of this thing, and that they need to eat healthy foods, and we have plenty of healthy foods, and it's easy to grow healthy foods. In your backyard you can grow, on the walls you can grow healthy foods. On their ceiling, we showed in the refugee camps, on the roofs you can have a small aquaponic system and grow vegetables and fish if you want in the same system. We brought people from Gaza and showed them how to build aquaponic systems. So yeah, it's an issue of education, it's an issue of knowledge, spreading it, showing them by examples, and we are relatively successful in that, but at a very small scale. What we need is much larger scale. I wish I have 100 people instead of 7 employees and 7 volunteers on a weekly basis at the Institute, including me and Jesse, who are volunteers. Yeah. We should stop.
These new books, photography books. One of them is called Revolution in Black and White, and it's about the civil rights era and early 60s in the South. And we have some more wonderful photography library on the 3rd floor that has more of the same. The photographer named Danny Lyon. I've been thinking lately about Israel's intent in that area to create a pre-civil rights era South, except worse. What do you think of that?
I mean, the question, I'll repeat the question for the sake of the online people. He's talking about the similarities between what's happening in our country, in Palestine, under Israeli rule, and the civil rights movement. Basically, things like Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. Yes, there is a lot of similarities, because oppression is oppression, and liberation movements are liberation movements, whether they are in the US South or in South Africa under apartheid, or in Palestine under Israeli apartheid and colonialism. There is a lot of similarities. There are differences, though, and these differences are also to be noted and to be dealt with. Between each situation and the next situation, there may be some differences, but we can talk about that if you want. But there are similarities. Certainly, the language of oppression, the language that these blacks, for example, are endangering our way of life, that the white culture will disappear if we empower them. This language of oppression, a language, sometimes I call it a pathology of, many times there's this pathology of superiority, inferiority complex, on the one hand, the whites in the South felt threatened by, as many white Americans now feel threatened by immigrations and Mexicans, you know, their invasion of the US by immigrants, you know. This language that they are threatening something that I hold dear, that I want to keep, and at the same time, so that's the inferiority part. The superiority part, that I'm smarter than them and I'm deserving of having this privilege, so I should keep this privilege. This is another side of it, of this you know, mental image that they have of themselves. But as I said, there's also distinctness and differences in the US. For example, the blacks were brought to this country against their will, and they became citizens after basically the civil rights, not the civil rights, the Civil War in the 1860s, but they never got their full freedoms until much later to become really given some equality. But even today, they're not given some equality. I think we should stop because I see some people are starting to want to leave. And I ask you, if you want to support us, donate some money. If you have money to give us, I'll leave my hat here if you want. You can put some money in it. But more importantly, if you want to come and volunteer with us, support us from distance, you would be more than welcome to support us. Volunteer with us, help us in any way you can, network us with others. As I said, I need some emails from those of you who are not on our email list, and you can give them to Jesse there in the back, or you can sign up on his sheet, and I will take a photograph of it. It's back there. So we will have your email addresses. All right? Thank you.